once again, and welcome to Heroes and Droids, your guide to movies and TV shows about superheroes, sci-fi, Disney, and action. From Marvel to DC, from Star Wars to Star Trek, from James Bond to the Fast and the Furious. We will review theatrical films and streaming delights you care about most. And this week we're reviewing Star Wars, The Bad Batch, Episode 11, Devil's Deal. A mouthful. All right, I am your host, Doc Rodden, and joining me tonight are Chris Slattery, also known as the Slattman. How you doing, sir?
Fantastic. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. Also joining us, podcasting rockstar and international cosplay queen, Vanessa. How you doing, Vanessa?
Pretty good. Really good after watching this episode.
Really good. Awesome. And, of course, it wouldn't be the show without award-winning filmmaker Christopher G. Moore. How you doing, sir?
What's up? What's up, my Star Wars peeps?
Your Star Wars peeps. Now, you know that they're not all marshmallows, but that's not what them.
That was such a
This
dad
is
joke.
This is how you're going to start that.
Such a dad joke. Here, take my dad hat.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to give our first impression of the show, which will be spoiler free, and then we're going to dive into the specifics of the show, which will be spoiler, including Christopher G. Moore's what are we going to call them? Easter eggs?
Ooh,
Episode Easter eggs.
Yes, episode
I
Easter
forgot.
eggs.
I'm
Yes.
excited.
And then we'll wrap things up with our final thoughts, our score 1 to 5, and our favorite scene. But what are we talking about? What is this show? It is Star Wars: The Bad Batch. It's streaming on Disney, season 1, episode 2. Damn it, you did it to me. Episode 11, Devil's Deal, July 9th, 2021. We had this whole thing at the beginning of the show, pre-show. Like, no, it's not episode 2. No, it's 11. And then that got in my head. And I couldn't let it go. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Directed by Brad Rao and Stuart Lee. Written by David Filoni and Jennifer Corbett. Cast includes D. Bradley Baker, Michelle Ang, Vanessa Marshall, Robin Atkin Downs, Farrelith Young, Corey Burton. Synopsis is, as the seeds of the rebellion foment? Is that a word? Foment? On an outer rim, the Empire schemes to squash it. Is that a word? Foment? Why are you laughing at me?
It means to instigate or stir up.
Okay.
Foment.
Your reaction to it was just.
I think it's funny that you read over it beforehand and you thought everything was okay, but then reading it out loud is when you questioned that word.
You are
I think
kidding.
that's the funny part of it.
There is something wrong with me. Oh my god, but that's all right. All right, let's get on with our first impression. Slapman, sir, you are up first. What did you think of episode 11?
So in episode II, there seems to be two camps of people on the internet. There are the people that have absorbed almost all of Clone Wars and Rebels and really like this episode because of a certain character named Hera and the backstory of her parents and everything. And then there's the people who haven't really have that connection and they feel let down because this episode of The Bad Batch had 2 minutes of The Bad Batch. And I think between the four of us, we're about 50-50 on those for those two. I am on the side where I really liked this episode. But a lot of that has nothing to do with The Bad Batch. It has to do with my prior attachment to Hera, my prior attachment to Chopper, and my prior attachment to her parents as well, and the connections that these characters have to other stories in Star Wars. So I really want to preface that I love it for what it is because of the connections. And some of the scene, but moving on beyond the story, this episode had some really well animated scenes and some beautiful like shots. Without getting into too many spoilers or specifics, a couple that really come to mind are when we're on the moon. Just that scene just so well animated and so beautiful to look at. Like that could be a screenshot and put it as a desktop. I would love it.
Mm.
And I really want to point out Howser is best clone. He might become Rex 2.0. He's fantastic. And I just one last thing, I love the voice acting in this episode. Specifically, I really love what Vanessa Marshall was able to do as Hera, because she was able to make Hera sound 10 years younger than she was in Rebels, while being like almost 10 years older when she first recorded Hera. So that's pretty fantastic, and the complete opposite of what Freddie Prinze Jr. did earlier in the season with Kanan. So I just props to Vanessa Marshall for a really good performance as Hera.
Yes, very good. I didn't even realize it was the same person, so that is actually quite remarkable. All right, Vanessa, you're up next. Your first impression of Bad Batch 10+1.
10 plus 1. 1 is the loneliest number. +1. I have to agree with the Slattman for the same reasons. I really enjoyed this episode for Hera, for Chopper, for what it could bring for our future live action shows, to see Hera and Omega crossing paths, in their 40s. There was so much about this episode that I loved that, yes, had very little to do right now with the Bad Batch, but as we know, this is a part 1 of 2. So I know our Bad Batch is going to come into play heavily in the next episode, but it brought me so much joy to see a young Hera and to see Chopper and to see Chopper being his regular silly self. It was so familiar to me because of the attachment I've built through Rebels, to see them again. And once again, I like to see the kind of more political side of what's going on. So you do get a lot of that, and you see how the Rebels are trying to work. These pre-rebellion is trying to work and gather supplies and do what they have to do. And I love that they, without giving up too much away my first impression, but I love that they are weaving our Bad Batch into those already existing stories, cementing their place in this universe by bringing them into this story that is taking place at another time or another, place in our Star Wars history. So yeah, I had a lot of fun feelings for this episode. I'm very much looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I feel you. All right, Christopher G. Moore, sir. What was your first impression of Bad Batch episode 11?
This was the best episode. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
This is probably my least favorite episode of the whole season. But it's still a good episode, and I think a lot of people definitely are tying their feelings into certain characters that were in Rebels, which is cool. But the problem is this episode basically repeats parts of the previous episode. And I hope the rest of the season isn't them going to every planet where some, politician gets up that has to get up there and speak because the Empire's, strong, forcing them to, and then the people are trying to rebel and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, how many times we got to see this? We already saw this in the episode previously. So why didn't we just, if we're going to introduce Hera, then let's make that about that instead of the previous episode. It seems very repetitive and kind of boring, and it's lazy storytelling is what it is. Especially when you have so many episodes that you have to tell a story. Now, still, it's a good episode, and it's got some interesting things. I just love it that we introduced another spunky young character that was a big problem with me to begin with this series. But she's not as annoying as Omega was in the very beginning. And then we reduced the Bad Batch to being side characters in their own series as their name on it. It'd be like an episode of Knight Rider or Knight Rider just drops off something, and then we specialize on these characters in this small town or something. It I don't know. I don't know. It to me it sidetracking them, even though they're going to show up in another episode. It felt very fan servicey, but on the prequel level, where we have to tell all these backstories and how characters got to where they are. And granted, maybe when I get around to watching the rest of Rebels, maybe I'll appreciate it more. It still had some really interesting elements, and still it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, especially when the Bad Batch come back and try to help. But overall, it was a disappointment for me. But again, it probably has more to do with me not seeing the other series. But I think at the same time, if I have to know these other series to appreciate it more, what does that say about the episode? I'll probably get a lot of hate mail about me saying this, because at the same time, if Darth Vader showed up in every episode for no reason, I probably would be happy. So I can't really criticize anybody. Just me personally, I was kind of thrown off. I didn't. It almost felt kind of different than some of the other episodes, and I really want to see. I think the problem was we've also had these other episodes that kind of weren't really pushing the storyline, forward. We had the previous episode; it felt like it should have been earlier, and then we have this one's kind of disjointed from that. So I don't know. I kind of want to get back to the Bad Batch team, because that's the reason that I was tuning into this series, not to be tying into other prequels to other characters. But I don't know. Again, I still need to get around to watching all of Rebels, and maybe I'll learn to appreciate it a little bit more after seeing that. So yeah, I wasn't as digging this episode as previous episode, but it's still a good episode, even though I'm not liking it as the previous ones. But it's me just being, it's just me being, upset because I want more Bad Batch. I want more stuff with them. So
it's worth pointing out you're not alone, so I don't think you're gonna get a lot of hate mail like you think you are.
Okay.
You're not even alone on this podcast. To paraphrase, when we reviewed Godzilla on the H&R show, I want more Bad Batch in my Bad Batch TV show. Yeah, I was underwhelmed by the show for the reason why I came to watch the show, which is Bad Batch, right? We get some of them, and for maybe 5 minutes at the most, and it's good, and I like that Omega and Era, create this connection, and it felt genuine. So, there was a little bit of distrust at first, and then they kind of discovered each other. So it was kind of really neat in that respect, and it's neat to see Omega be like a kid finding a friend, right? So but that's just a small section of the show. So the rest of it, and there's a little bit of a spoiler, sorry, but the rest of the show is about this political intrigue, and I didn't realize it, Chris, but you're right. We basically saw the same political aspect of it last episode with the senator there. This one has a little bit more history, so people know this one's more important than that one. So it almost feels like, if I had a choice, just wash the other one away, right? We didn't need episode 10, just go straight into 11, and it would be fine. I think that would be less of a problem. It is repetitive, but but at the same time, it totally entertained me. It's really well done. Like it's like the Slattman said, the animation is fantastic, but I was kind of like a little, slightly kind of like, where's the Bad Batch? Where's my Bad Batch?
Allow me to retort.
Yeah, to retort.
So Crosshair is part of the Bad Batch. Crosshair was in almost every single scene.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Right? So you can't say we didn't get enough Bad Batch, because Crosshair is still a part of that. Secondly,
that's a good argument.
you can say lazy you can say
Mhm.
lazy story writing, but you can also say third party perspective on our main characters, which gives us another point of view on them and where they fall in this universe. And I think you're not giving enough credit to the episodes that are going to come. This is a story that's still being told, so we don't know how the last episode and how this episode are going to play into the greater story that they're telling. And I could be totally wrong. Like, we could never hear from the last senator ever again, right? But I just think, like, you're putting a lot on this one episode and not allowing it to, like, tell the story that it's trying to tell. You know, not giving it enough open perspective on it. But at the same time, I'm still seeing it from a certain perspective because I like those characters so much and I see how they play into this.
I have one thing I'd like to add too. A great man once said that a good story, it's like poetry. It rhymes. And one thing that the last episode and this episode 10 and 11 do have in common is it shows the links that the Empire is willing to go to in order to take over a a planet that they need / and or want. So it's continuing to vilify the Empire, which we already know is pretty bad, but it's continuing to show that, you know, they're being pretty consistent throughout the entire galaxy, and they're willing to go to extreme measures to make the populations like buckle at their knees towards them. So I appreciated that, even if it is, you know, basically the same scene with two different characters, like you guys mentioned.
And I kind of like to, piggybacking off of that, kind of more general, is them showing the Empire de-arming the citizens.
Yeah,
It's something that we know of, but I hadn't really thought of. And so seeing that, having that particular scene in this really was kind of heavy for me, right? To see that. And then them having that conversation of, okay, they're going to come in and protect us, but why should we trust them to protect us? So that felt very real to me in that moment, and especially in the context of the Empire and how the Empire gained control, right? How they ultimately made the citizens of the planets powerless in order to have complete control.
Yeah. We didn't know when they were going to help us. They were going to stick around afterwards, right?
Right.
That's what they
Yeah.
say. So I mean, there's a lot going on with this, and it's, like I said, it's worth watching. But it just, and yes, Crosshair is part of the Bad Batch, but I don't know.
He's more of the villain of the Bad Batch right now.
Well, right now,
He
yeah,
is, yeah.
and it would have. I don't know. I kind of wish our characters were a little bit more involved. I mean, it's certainly hinted, and there's certainly enough going on that's going to give it, get them involved in the second half. Obviously, I don't know. I'm still struggling with it. I don't want to go off like, giving an impression I hated this episode. It's not my least favorite. That probably was last week, but it is. It isn't what the first ones. I don't know. I was really getting into them, and this one's kind of lost my interest a little bit.
That's the same for me.
Sadly.
Also, they didn't even bat an eye when they showed up with the weapons and they looked like stormtroopers. So there wasn't even kind of question if they were part of that or not. So
I will give you that. That is a major plot hole that I did not like.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I thought that too when I was watching.
yeah, I
it.
thought that was kind of
Okay.
weird. It's like
Okay.
their place is getting taken over by stormtroopers, but then you have these people showing up
here comes 4 of them.
that look
coming
like
out of the
stormtroopers,
ship.
and I'm like, why didn't they even question that? There should have been something, at least in the dialogue, to end of that, because I would have been like, oh no,
Okay. I thought it was crazy.
okay. Well, see, that was one of the things that kind of bothered me too. It's like, okay, they're fighting against stormtroopers. They're getting guns
Yeah.
from stormtroopers. There's like, this is a sting.
Yeah, I was going to bring
Exactly.
that up in my final thoughts as why I'm not giving this a as high of a score as
Oh,
you might
gotcha.
expect.
Okay, well, at least we could agree on one.
Yeah.
But there's some of the other things I think we'll all agree on is there's a lot of implications as to the greater Star Wars universe in this episode, and I think that was a very clever segue to Christopher G. Moore's references.
Oh yeah, we have to do these references. Before we, well, it's probably going to come up as references. So Christopher, let us have it. What did we miss?
Yeah, I think actually just researching this stuff, it made me appreciate the episode a little bit more, just how it ties into different things. But of course, we have the home planet of Ryloth, which is the planet of Twi'leks like Bib Fortuna and Return of the Jedi. Of course, I got it. Where's my Bib Fortuna? Yeah, Bib Fortuna. As well as a lot of Twi'leks, of course, that have been featured in episodes of Clone Wars and Rebels, which the planet has featured as well. Senator Ta, he actually had his first appearance in the background of Attack of the Clones. He was in the background, wasn't even a featured character.
What?
And he was often used in Clone Wars to show the corrupt side of the Senate and that kind of stuff. Of course, we have Cam, who, if you pay attention, who's also a character showing up in Clone Wars and stuff, the whole thing involving Twi'leks. And also, he has a tattoo on one of his Leku, which is the head tendrils, that it's a symbol of his house, which is similar to the designs are on the wife's Kalikori, which is the sacred heirloom in Rebels. So if you pay attention to the little tattoo on that. Of course, Hera, who's returning from, we get to see sort of a younger version of that character that was introduced in Rebels, where we see in Rebels, we finally see that she becomes this pilot that she wanted to become, that we sort of see the early stages of that in this. Also, if you didn't know, she gets a shout out in Rogue One, because there's one part where they hear like, General Syndulla, please report to the briefing room.
Mm-hmm.
So she even gets a reference in that. So she's somewhere in Rogue One, where you'll have to find. Of course, we have the droid Chopper that returns.
Chopper.
And one of my favorite moments is when his little viewer, his little electronic camera, whatever, pops up, which you remember, it's very similar to the camera the R2-D2 has, and he pops up in Empire Strikes Back when he goes into the bog. One thing to pay attention to, which I kind of noticed, even though I hadn't seen Rebels, we have Hera's theme, which plays in parts of this. They kind of mix it with Leia's theme a little bit, so you get a little bit of a mixture of that to sort of like, which is a nice little tie-in as well. In one part, you see the Empires, they're setting up a Dunian mine, which is they mine basically metal that they use to build starships, and that element of history is featured heavily in the Timothy Zahn's novel Thrawn, if you've read that.
I'm so happy you mentioned that one.
Okay.
Because Dunium is specifically what they made the Death Star out of. Yeah,
and I'm sure that's also probably a reference to Dune as well. So which they have the spice smuggling, which ties into the Dune sci-fi novels. One interesting thing is like when Omega and Hera are talking, and Hera's describing flying. She says flying is about a feeling to her, which that description Omega kind of connects with, because if she's force sensitive, and the reason that's important is that force sensitivity is also realized by Finn in Rise of Skywalker, when the girl asks her, "Do you know?" and it's like, it's a feeling. So that's another reference to the force involving the feeling, which to me kind of makes me think Omega is force sensitive, even though some of you guys are negative Ninny about it.
Reach out with your feelings.
Yes, exactly. Feelings has been mentioned several times in regards to the force. So again, we get another reference to that. And I thought that was a nice little call out to Rise of the Skywalker as well. the turbo tank that they're riding in and driving the Empire. We first saw that with Jyn Erso was transported in that in Rogue One, and then later we saw sort of a similar tank used in The Mandalorian season 2.
The bridge.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And then finally, the Cam is riding a blurg, which was first introduced in the Ewok TV movie Battle of Endor, and then was later shown in like episodes, I think Clone Wars, as well as we saw it in Mandalorian, of course, where people are like, ooh, the blurgs.
The blurgs.
So,
blurgs.
So there you go. There's all my that's all my reference.
May I add one more to your list? So in Rebels, Hera, when Kanan first meets clones for the first time since Order 66, he says, we'll see if that gets changed at some point. Hera mentions that not all clones are bad. In fact, without clones, she would have never. The clones are the reason she escaped from the Empire when they took over Ryloth, her hometown, her home planet. So it's really cool that they took that line and they're inserting it into the Bad Batch. Where I wonder what clones are going to come and help.
I wonder which clones could they be?
Also, it also seems like Hauser is probably is not affected by the chip, the inhibitor chip
as much. Yeah.
And
can you tell us more about Hauser?
Well, this is the first time we've ever seen him.
Oh, okay.
But one of the really interesting things is that a couple episodes ago, Rex actually says that there are a small amount of clones that were not impacted by the inhibitor chip. And it seems like Hauser might be one of them, and he might work with the Bad Batch to help save as many Twi'leks as possible, including but not limited to Hera and her family.
Yeah.
Because at least her father shows up in Rebels. So
yeah, you had me going. I thought Hauser was a character that we knew a lot about.
No, this is the first time we've met him, and he's fantastic already.
yeah. He's obviously, on the edge of not following orders, being rebellious, if you will.
He's not following the good soldiers follow orders.
No, but he knows that he has to be very, very careful. So, are we expecting him to? Is that what, I guess that's what you're saying, is we're expecting him to kind of head off with the Twi'leks guys.
Mm-hmm. And probably work with the Bad Batch to help.
Well, that's one thing I was wondering. Do you think the Bad Batch will ever grow in numbers? No?
I mean, maybe by one with Omega, but
well, that's true. I guess they
get
already.
Crosshair back, but no, I mean, I don't think in particular.
But I think that they'll probably work with the rebellion once that's officially created.
Is that season 2? Are we going to get into season 2?
I hope.
That would be fun.
It'd be like they join the rebellion and season 2's.
I wouldn't mind once this story is done if there's like a time jump to a couple years, so the rebellion is going a little stronger.
Be interesting.
I hope they haven't announced the season 2 yet, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I hope it's not a one and done kind of thing.
I think I feel like
they're
popular, aren't they?
Well, at the same time, there's never really been any kind of stories and stuff, I guess. So it makes me wonder if they're going to survive at the end of the season or not.
Well, that's a problem too, right? Because they could all.
Because if they did anything big, you think we would know about that in some of the stories by now. But there's such a new thing that have to integrate them some way to where they might be like secretive, I guess, or something. Maybe they're secretive parts of the rebellion.
They could be the covert. See what Andor? Was it
like
Andor?
the Navy SEALs
Cassian Andor.
Yeah, or they could show up in Obi-Wan.
They could.
They would be very old.
Oh God, I'd love to see live action versions of them.
I mean, they'd be
Yeah.
about as old as Rex was at that time, and he was still
Yeah.
kicking it
Yeah.
in Rebels, because Rebels and Obi-Wan are going to be taking place around the
That's
same time.
true.
So
That's true.
Yeah.
That-
And we already
yeah,
have the
they
actor
could.
at the age to play them all. I mean, will he? I mean, he could be in Andor too, right? Well, if that would be much later, right? Because we
Not
don't
about
know.
this-
We don't know how far
Well,
before.
Andor takes place at some time before A New Hope
Yeah.
and after Order 66.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and we don't know where in that.
And
Obviously,
it's I think it's before the rebellion, right? It's like at the start of the fully formed rebellion,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is like the early days of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
right?
It's
Yeah.
gonna be interesting because I know we're yeah. So speculation. All right. Well, let's go into our final thoughts, our score, and fave, and our favorite scene. But before we do, we want to thank you for hanging out with us. We hope you're enjoying not only this review, but many others that we have on the site. Not only are we covering The Bad Batch, we covered 2 seasons of Mandalorian, and we're covering the Marvel episodes as well, including but not limited to Loki, which the finale is coming up as we're recording this. We cannot wait for that. If you'd like to help us out, it's easy and free to do. Hit the subscribe button down below or share it with a friend. And of course, we'd love to hear your comments. We've been getting some, you guys need to check them out. We've been getting some great comments lately. Some fun comments. Some of them are out of left field. I have no idea what they're trying to say, but I'm like, okay. And then other ones have like, man, I didn't even think of that.
I do need
That's
to
cool.
check out the comment section.
Yes. All right, so let's do this. Final thought, score, and favorite scene. Slattman, sir, you are up first.
So I'm going to reiterate that I really like this episode for what it is because of my connection to Hera and to some of the other characters that we have in this episode. And I will acknowledge that it is very weird to have a Bad Batch episode without the Bad Batch. But I do think that this episode was an interesting story and an interesting way to show the links that the Empire is going to take over some of these planets, and it kind of vilifies them even more. Kind of puts Crosshair in a different perspective, that he's just blindly following orders, although there are moments where I feel like he hesitates a little. Maybe that's just me being hopeful though. And I really and I do enjoy the little moment that we do get with between Hera and Omega, and because it's such a wholesome moment. Just 2 teenagers talking about what they love and showing off what they love, really. And that's actually going to be my favorite scene. So I'm kind of
Damn you, Chris Slattery.
yeah, sorry.
I think you took all of our favorites.
And I just, again, I want to give a lot of praise to the voice actress that plays Hera and all the voice acting, because it's all done very well in this episode. And a good continuation for the characters that we know from Clone Wars to show that they've got a little age. And I don't know. I love the connection that we get to just other stories as well, with the Dunium mine, and just the fact that you notice, if you look closely, a lot of the gunships, they don't have the Republic markers anymore, like they did in Clone Wars. So they're slowly transitioning all the clone stuff from looking like the Republic army to the Empire. So it's just small little things like that just make me smile. But the episode is not without faults. That one plot hole that we talked about earlier does bother me a lot, that they wouldn't freak out immediately when they saw clones after being harassed by clones. And it did feel very odd that the Bad Batch were in it for all of 2 minutes, and this was in a Bad Batch episode. This seems more. It seemed like it would take place more in a comic spin-off,
You know, like a crossover.
Yeah, a
show.
crossover or something. Like that's what it really felt like. So because of that, I'm gonna give it a 4. It's lacking a lot of what we look for in the Bad Batch, but I love what it does bring, and I love what it brings for Star Wars as a whole.
Which is what we're watching. It is Star Wars, The Bad Batch. All right, Vanessa, you're up next. What is your final thoughts? Your score and favorite scene?
Do I look like Bib if I do this?
Maybe it needs to be a little thicker.
Yeah, fatter. I'll work on it.
Yeah.
Y'all know I enjoyed this episode. And piggyback off of what the Slattman said. You know, for reasons because of Rebels, this episode was really awesome to me, and I had a lot of fun with it. Just seeing Chopper again. Anytime I can get more Chopper, it's gonna make me happy. And I really like seeing what the Empire is doing, how it's affecting people, making it feel real instead of so, far away, right? Something that is happening out in the galaxy somewhere, but they make it feel real. And I think that's important, especially that disarming, when they started disarming the people of the planet. It really struck me as like, wow, that's some Empire shit right there to do that. And Chris took my favorite scene, and he explained it so well, because it is such a sweet moment, and it really just plants a seed for what we're gonna see. You know what they're talking about, and each of their perspectives on flight. I think we're gonna see that come together in this next episode. I hope we get to see them pilot something. So I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna give it a 4. And my favorite scene now. I know I
Drum
gotta
roll, if you please.
I gotta think about it. No, I already know what it is. It's more so because it's just really great television. But it's the scene where I can't remember his name, the military guy from the Empire.
The
The
Admiral.
Tarkin's like secondhand man.
Yeah.
Rampart.
Rampart,
yeah.
yeah. When he's doing the old switcheroo on the Bad Batch, and he tells them we're going to surrender and give them what they want, and then they turn around and they capture them all. I just thought that was really, really good TV. That was a really good moment. You saw what was unfolding. You knew what was going to happen. You saw Crosshair out there waiting for his moment. I didn't expect them to shoot the senator, to stun. I'm assuming they stunned the senator. I mean, I don't think he's
They
dead.
shoot him through the Leku.
Yeah, right. He's not dead. They just knock him out, I think.
But
maybe not.
I thought they
dead?
shot him in the head, but
But,
maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to go
Is
back
he
and see
dead?
that.
Okay, maybe
But
he is dead.
The cool thing about that is that it really shows the lengths that they're willing to go to control
Right.
a planet, framing the attempted assassination of a senator.
On the ones that caused the most trouble. Yeah.
That moment was intense.
Yeah.
Empire's evil.
The evil Empire. Christopher G. Moore, sir, your final thoughts, your score and favorite scene.
So this episode is definitely not one of my favorites, but it's still got some important parts in it. And it's still a good episode, even if it's not what I wanted it to be. I think just the way it departures, and even though Slattman tried to hit me with the whole rhyming thing, like you don't do that so back to back. It's usually that the repetition happens like in another from trilogy to trilogy, but when you do it back to back, that's just, I don't know. It seemed even though we are supposed to be showing like how the Empire is sort of infiltrating all these different planets, so but I think it's one of those things where I've sat with it more and just pouring into all the connections and stuff. I can appreciate it a little bit more for what it's doing, but again, it's also one of those sort of two-parters that, so it's not really a strong episode on its own. It has to be connected to so many things for it to be important. So yeah, it's not one of my favorites, but it's still a good episode compared to other stuff out there. So, I'll give it a 3.25 out of 5. I mean, it's probably the lowest rating I'll give anything right now. But and maybe a lot of that, maybe that would change once I see Rebels. Maybe my attitude change once I get to understand the Hera thing. But I mean, there's some really nice moments.
When you see the last episode of Rebels, everything is going to change for you.
I've seen one snippet, and that's the Vader fight, and I did like
that's
that.
in the middle,
but that's the only thing I really cared about seeing. But I'll go back.
Good.
I'll go back and watch it and sort of see what everybody's into.
Oh my god!
So as for favorite scene, I will say there's a nice moment when Hera's like laying back on her back and she's watching the birds fly by. And she moves her hands like she's like thinking about like flying a plane. I thought that was nice. But I'll say probably my favorite scene would be just them trying to stop the vehicle and stuff, and they're like stopping all these like stormtroopers on like the little speeder bikes and stuff. I love some of the action in that where they're having to figure out ways to stop them and stuff. I thought that was kind of cool. It felt very westerny, like where you're trying to stop the stagecoach and you're trying to stop all the different, people riding around it and stuff. So I love the kind of Western element of that specific scene where they're going through a canyon and stuff. So, so yeah, that's probably my favorite scene of this episode.
Yeah, that did feel like a Western of it, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to end up repeating myself. Basically, this isn't one of my favorite episodes, and it's all because, I wanted more Bad Batch in it. The Bad Batch that we get is great, and the Omega scene is even better, and would obviously be my favorite scene if I could have had it. So I'm not really going to say much more about it. 3.75 is my score. And a favorite scene, it's so hard but I do like that you described it as a Western, because it does kind of feel that way. So now I'm kind of struggling for a favorite scene, and the one I'm going to choose isn't really for the scene, but for the character development. So if you'll allow me that, and that's when Hera is on the mission to reach where the Bad Batch are going to give them the weapons, and she's her the way the uncle got her on board was I thought you would fly the plane. She gets to fly, right? And we don't get to see a lot of that, but we see how important it is to her, and it's just this huge character moment for her, that the whole idea, the whole concept of her, and we get to see her the foundation of that love, for flying. And she's one of the best pilots out there, right? So I really, really enjoyed seeing that passion awaken in a character. So, which is what this show has a lot going on, is character moments, right?
Yep.
All right. So it'll be interesting, Christopher G. Moore, you and I, if our minds will change next week when we see the second half of this storyline.
Well, adding more Bad Batch is going to make it tremendously better
and
for me.
More explosions.
Yeah, more explosions, or just the Bad Batch being back, because I really missed them. It felt like it was missing something. And I think for me that it lost a little bit of it, even though people love the Hera character, it lost a little bit of its soul to me, to where it's like I wanted the Bad Batch to be back. I wanted to be integrated as part of that. And so I'm sure that'll happen in the next episode, and I'll be like, oh, I'm back on track again.
The Batch is back.
Yeah.
Man, now we'll appreciate them more.
I'm hoping we'll get to see, like, to me, it was all worth it if we get to see Omega and Hera
together.
pilot a ship together. Like I would probably shed a few tears. Like, oh,
No.
They will see the spin-off Hera and Omega, the adventures of
Ooh.
Hera and Omega.
bad bitches.
I mean, what if they're setting up what if they're setting up Rangers to be those two characters?
They did talk about Hera taking over for Cara Dune in that role.
Yeah,
So they could continue on with that.
you could see that.
We'll see. We'll see. I do want to see live action versions of these characters.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're gonna see Omega and Book of Boba Fett in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
It's looking more and more like it. Oh, hey, there's a cat.
Alpha and Omega.
The Book of Alpha Fett. All right, guys, that's our review of the Star Wars: The Bad Batch, episode 11. We will continue reviewing the remaining 5 episodes of this season. It's getting down, to we're in the final legs, right?
Almost there.
And of course, Loki ends this week, and then I guess we'll head up for some What If coming in about a month or so, and then as we alluded to, we have the Book of Boba Fett coming toward the last.
Don't forget about Star Wars Visions.
And Visions, yes, there's that as well. Oh my, we're enjoying our Star Wars and MCU.
I know, the most Star Wars ever, right? In the history of Star Wars. I feel like we're getting the most of it right now.
And arguably the best.
Well, they're able to sort of play around with it, and that's the important part of it, is trying to tell different stories instead of it just being the same type of stuff over and over.
All right. Well, thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Slattman, for joining me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I always love talking Star Wars with you guys.
Yes, you do. Star Wars is your jam. Let's say goodnight.
Good night.
Good night.